So good day, everyone. I'm Artemis and welcome. This talk is being presented through Public Relations Committee of California Zoroastrian Center, CZC. This committee was formed in 2020 and operates under CZC Board of Directors. We welcome questions and all individuals interested in learning more about the teachings of Zarathustra. Devotion to Wisdom is the first public talk sponsored by this committee, and we hope to have more interactive sessions in the future. Now, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our speaker today. I met and started working with Mr. Naveed Mansourian over a year ago. And during this time, I've come to respect him as a knowledgeable and an amazing person who lives by the teachings of Zarathustra. Naveed has been a student of the Gathas and Zarathustra's teachings for 25 years. He currently serves on the California Zoroastrian Center's Public Relations Committee, helping people who'd like to learn more about Zarathustrian philosophy. Naveed Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Artemis Jan. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm so glad I connected with you in the Public Relations Committee, and I'm so excited for this work to get underway. Let me go ahead and try to share my screen. Let me get this going. All right. Can everyone see this all right? No? Let's go. Does this show up? Does the slideshow show up?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So yes, today we wanted to begin a conversation today on the message of Mazda Yasna, or the philosophy of Zarathustra. I wanted to kind of first start this off and mention this as a thought catalyst. That's the intention of this presentation. This is not a one-way talk. What I'm hoping to do is I'll share some context on Zarathustra's teachings from the Gathas, which I've learned over the years, mainly from looking at and working through a lot of the scholarly works of several Mazdayasni scholars that I really respect deeply. We're fortunate to have Dina McIntyre here, who is one of those scholars I very much revere and respect, and I've learned so much from. In addition to Dr. Jafari and Dr. K.D. Irani, I do have an acknowledgements and links section at the end of the presentation. So I do want to start that up front and say thank you for this amazing work. I've learned so much from all of you. I'm hoping that as Mazda Yasna encourages each individual to think for oneself and utilize the divine within our good mind and search for truth, the goal of this presentation is for us to begin this conversation and be a thought catalyst. So I'm looking for, I'll probably talk for about 25, 30 minutes, just share some context of where I've learned, give an overview. And the hope is that we have a discussion together in the remaining time, and we can talk about how we look at improving our existence. Does that sound like a good plan with everyone? All right, let's get started. So what is the core message of Zarathustra? And I think before we fall into this message, I want to start with one quick thought. I think it's really important for us to try to think about this message and the teachings of Zarathustra with a clean slate, however possible. The world we live in is biased by all the beliefs in the worldview that we see prevalent. And this is influenced by many, many religions, philosophies, perspectives that came much longer after Zarathustra's time. So I want to kind of throw that out there as like, please try to keep an open mind and think about this as a fresh way of looking at our reality. This might look familiar to Dina, and again, I think this is a very perfect way of teasing kind of the overall kind of core message of Zarathustra that she has put together, and I'm borrowing it from her. But in essence, Zarathustra teaches a system, a way of looking at our reality that is timeless. And I think the first step here is that we are throughout our lives confronted by choices, and we should then use our minds and our hearts to search for the truth, for what is right and good in all aspects of our reality. And we do this by choosing it, and choosing it with every thought, with every word, with every action we take, and through active engagement of the world. We are not rejecting it. We're not isolating ourselves. We need to engage the world and make it a better place. Like we're saying here, then perfecting our world and ourselves until we become one with the divine, until we realize the divine and become part of the endless lights. And I think this is a beautiful metaphor. We'll discuss it more. Again, thank you to Dina. I think this is just such a beautiful way of teasing, I think, the overall message. And we'll kind of dive into this more as we go through this discussion together today. And I'm looking forward to learning more from each other. Before we do that, I wanted to just share a couple slides on a brief history of that's relevant here, just to set the context and again, to put some things in frame for us. This photo is from the British Museum. I took this myself actually when visiting London with my wife, and it is from King Artaxerxes III from the 4th century BCE. He was an Achaemenid king, and the inscription is really beautiful for me personally. What it reads is, it says, "A great God is Ahura Mazda, who created this earth, who created yonder sky, who created man, who created happiness for man, and who created me, Artaxerxes." What I think is amazing, and again, I want everyone to maybe think about this throughout as we talk, and I'd love to hear about it in the discussion. Happiness for mankind, for humankind, is on par with creation of the skies and the heavens, which is like an amazing thought if you really, really let that kind of serve some meditative thought there. Oh, sorry, let me push this forward. There we go. So quick couple slides on history. Zarathustra called his teachings Daina Vangui. This means good conscience. A little later, some of his disciples coined a new term, Mazda Yasna, meaning devotion to wisdom or worship of wisdom. And this is very similar, if you think about it, to the Greek philosophia, which means love of wisdom. I often hear this from my friends when I'm talking to them around, hey, are you religious? Do you believe, is Zarathustra's message a religion or is it a philosophy? And I think lots of scholars have written about this as well. And again, if we think about devotion or worship of wisdom, worship, and we'll get to this from Zarathustra's perspective, is basically through our life and through our acts. And this is very much inclusive of love. And I think, in my personal opinion, his teachings, Zarathustra's teachings, is actually a spiritual philosophy that's really focused on improving our existence, our reality, through self-realization and realization of the divine. And we're going to get to understand this a little bit more, obviously, through this talk, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. A quick background on his teachings, Zarathustra himself. They're captured in 17 songs called the Gathas in an extinct Iranian language called Avestan. What's important to understand is Avestan was not well understood completely, and to this day probably is not, until linguists decoded it in the 18th century, after noticing a lot of similarities with Vedic Sanskrit. This is an important distinction for us to think about because as we look at lots of various translations of the Gathas, the issue for us to think about is often the translator or the linguist is bringing in their existing worldview. And it's something that we need to think about as we use our own good mind, again, which is part of the core message of Zarathustra. And we need to think through what we think these messages and these words mean for us. In terms of time frame and region, linguistic evidence dates the Gathas to around 1700 BCE. So this is all over 3,700 years ago. And Zarathustra was part of the Iranian pastoral tribes living in eastern Greater Iran, maybe in Khwarezmia, maybe near the Aral Sea. We don't know exactly, but the language is classified as an Eastern Iranian language. The philosophy itself was very influential during the Achaemenid, Parthian, and Sassanid Iranian empires that spanned over 1,000, 1,100 years. And as you can see, this is a map of the Achaemenid Empire. The span of influence of these ideas spread throughout the empire. So you have ideas influencing classical Greek philosophy all the way in the West. You have Egyptian and China and India in the East, basically all influenced. So these ideas spread all throughout the empire, and Zarathustrian ideas were quite influential. Zoroastrians were severely persecuted following the Muslim invasion of the Sassanid Iranian Empire, and the religion declined in prevalence over the subsequent centuries, but has survived. And I think it's seeing a tremendous revival as of late, again, following this new understanding or better understanding of Gothic the Gothic Avestan and the language, and our ability to talk through Zarathustra's core message. All right, so let's dive in together into what is the overall framework for Zarathustra's teachings. The foundational component is Asha, which is often translated as truth. In the Gathas, the divine is the source of all goodness, and the creation that Ahura Mazda, Zarathustra's name for the divine, conceives of is his wisdom, and his wisdom is called Asha. It is a perfect existence in purely ideal terms, and this mental ideal was then actualized in matter, so it becomes realized to some degree. Then Zarathustra views the existences of mind and matter as two parts of our current reality. So we have both a mental component and a physical component. And this physical existence, or our current reality, is a matrix for our spiritual growth through free will and through our choices, which we'll talk about a bit more today together. This spiritual growth comes from the quest for Asha, or truth, in both the dimensions of the physical and material, and the mental and the spiritual. But what is truth? How is it defined? Let's dive into this a little bit more together. Asha is the best good. In the material or physical world, truth is what's accurate, what fits. It's the laws that govern the universe. Things, basically forms of science that we know today, physics, chemistry, biology, the natural order of things. This is one of those areas where it's very unique that Zarathustra's message is very compatible with modern day understanding and is in a sense timeless, because we are taught to keep searching for the truth, for what is right in our physical world. And we embrace wisdom and science and knowledge. In the mental world of ideas, truth is what is right for all of existence. It has a moral component, so it is often also translated as righteousness in its purest form. In the Gathas, this includes notions such as goodness, justice, generosity, compassion, loving kindness. In essence, all of the things, the ideal order of things in the world of mind and spirit. So Asha is the relationship of all things in perfect harmony, such that nothing occurs at the expense of something else. It includes modern day notions, again, being very timeless, such as social justice, that no one should be prospering at the cost of someone else. And this extends out to our environment. We shouldn't be progressing at the expense of destroying our earth or having other harmful effects. So Asha in summary here is the best good. It is the perfect, true, entirely good, ideal order of existence. So one more slide here on Asha, and again, you'll understand, I think, why it's such a pivotal core component of Zarathustra's message, is Zarathustra urges us to seek the truth in all aspects of existence, with every thought, word, and deed. This is how we grow ourselves. And this is emphasized in the foundational prayer that many Zoroastrians will know, named called Ashem Vuhu. Ashem Vuhu translates, in this case, Asha is translated as righteousness. But again, I would ask you to think of its complete meaning we just talked about in the last couple slides. Whereas righteousness is the best good. It is radiant happiness. Radiant happiness comes to the person to whom righteousness is for the sake of the best righteousness alone. And here's the key part, which I think really sets Zarathustra's message really uniquely apart in today's worldviews. He's saying that we should be searching for the truth and do the right thing when we find it, not for fear of some kind of punishment, of a hell or a bad karma, or not because we want a reward or go to heaven, really just because it is the right thing to do and only for its own sake. And what's interesting about this, he calls this radiant happiness. He says, if we're succeed at this, if we really look and focus at truth for the sake of truth alone, this leads to radiant happiness, being in an enlightened state that naturally radiates to others and grows and becomes better. So earlier when we were starting the talk, I was playing just background music with Pharrell's happy song, which some of you may have heard. It's a nice popular song. And Pharrell says, happiness is the truth. And I think Zarathustra would respond and say, yes, and truth is happiness, right? So I thought that was like a cool play on modern thoughts that I think is very compatible with Zarathustra's message here. One other cool, quick side note here is this is I believe the oldest extant Zoroastrian text that we know of today. It's Ashem Vuhu written in Sogdian, which is an Eastern Iranian language, and it was found in Dunhuang, China, I believe from the 9th century. So again, just to emphasize how far Zarathustra's ideas did spread, that this was found all the way in China over 1,000 years ago. So next, we'd like to talk about how Zarathustra's message comes into our ways of being. And I love Dr. K.D. Irani's framing for this around moral vectors. In a lot of his talks and a lot of his writings that I've learned so much from, he really presents our reality, Zarathustra presents our reality as a conflict between two diametrically opposed ways of being. The Avestan word is manu. And I think there's various translations. Some translate this as mentality, some translate this as mind, or I like Dina McIntyre's translation. It resonates with me of a way of being in its entirety. And I think there's a lot of evidence on her website to go and understand that. And that's linked here in the deck. But really, if we think about it, here is one of the Gothic verses that really hits this home. And I wanted to share it with you. And again, let's think about this together and discuss it more. Now, the two foremost manus, known to be imaginary twins, are the better and the bad in thoughts, words, and deeds. Now, when the two mentalities first got together, they created life and not living. So the better mentality, or the better way of being, is spenta manu. And this is the vector that promotes Asha. So this central concept that we were all just talking about together. And this moves us towards the light so that we can make better choices. Light illumination enables us to see, to make conscious choices. Again, one of the core messages in Zarathustra's teachings. This brings us towards the best existence. And the opposite, or moving away, maybe I'm not going to say opposite, but moving away from this is a more destructive way of being. And it moves away from Asha, moves away from the light. And I think what's really interesting about some of these framings is that, this is mentioned as being two imaginary twins, right? So twins are part of, they basically exist in one container, right? So that if you think about this, twins come from one place, one container. So these are two different ways of being or perspectives. Later, this gets translated and personified as a binary dualist theology where good is versus evil. You have an all good deity, a god, and you have an all bad devil of some sorts. But this is not the message we see in the Gathas, which I think is very profound and interesting, where the struggle is, again, occurring in this one container, and that's the individual via our choices. So I think this is a very key distinction and interesting idea for Zarathustra's philosophy. I'd love for you to all think about as we dive deeper. So that leads to how we grow and why these ways of being matter. So spiritual growth occurs through free will. The universe is to be understood as a potentially ideal evolution. And through the virtue of our free will, there's the possibility of moving towards goodness, towards Asha, or away from it. And Zarathustra proposes that the world is capable of being perfected by the actions of humans by reason of their capacity of moral choice. So it is through our experiences with the law of consequences that comes in through Asha that enables us to utilize free will to choose, to learn, and grow spiritually, both at an individual level and a collective level. Through free will, we can iteratively, over time, slowly comprehend and realize Asha. And we'll get to some of these components in a minute to discuss the framework more. But once we realize this, we are now bringing to be the entirely good, true order of existence. And such that there is evil or harmful ways are only existing from Zarathustra's perspective in the individual. If we are choosing the more progressive, the more beneficial path, we can basically banish evil from existence because it will not be manifested in our material world. This is why the importance of the well-known Zoroastrian motto, many of you may have heard of it, is good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Good here is in line with Asha, is basically us driving beneficial thoughts, constructive thoughts, things that bring us closer towards Asha. I wanted to reflect for a moment with all of you. It was interesting. I was talking about this with my 7-year-old son this morning. He was asking me, what am I going to do today? I'm going to give a talk, about what? And I said a little bit about philosophy, and he knows Hashem Vuhu as a concept. We talk about it. And he was asking, he's like, what does this all mean? Right. And like, I used the word wisdom. I said, we're in the search of wisdom. And he's like, well, what does wisdom mean? And I explained it to him a little bit, going through some of the same concepts here. And I thought it was amazing. The mind of a 7-year-old. He reflected that this is like being a scientist for your own life. And I said, yes, exactly. I was so happy. I was like, I'm going to use this in my talk today. Like he totally grokked this as a 7-year-old, which was amazing to me, and kind of reinforces this idea that this message is timeless. It really does resonate with our modern day and age. And I think this was part of the genius of Zarathustra's philosophy. So how do we realize the divine, or what is the path for realization of the divine? So Zarathustra's philosophy is constructed on several abstract concepts. They are divine aspects of Ahura Mazda and a framework through which the divine is known and realized. They're essentially attributes, but also what's amazing, and I think again very unique, is Zarathustra says that we can attain these qualities ourselves. So the foundational component is Asha that we've already talked about, the ultimate truth, the ideal, entirely good form of existence. Then next we have what Zarathustra calls Vahumana, which translates often as good mind. This is our ability, the divine within, if you will, that allows us to comprehend Asha, or the truth, and recognize the disparity between the ideal and the real. It is our instrument of moral cognition, and as some might call this our conscience. This allows us to be awake and conscious and learn from the choices we're making throughout our daily lives. As we keep learning and be a scientist for our own lives, as my son was saying, we slowly start embodying truth. And this is the next divine aspect here, Spenta Armaiti. This, again, in terms of linguistics, might have various translations. Some people might translate this as serenity, some as devotion, some as piety. I love Gina McIntyre's proposal here around embodied truth. And I think they are actually all compatible if you think about it. Because as you embody truth, or Asha, through our thoughts, words, and deeds, it is characterized by benevolence, by devotion, by love, by serenity. I think this is where you kind of are characterized at the end of the day. You reach this peace that is very, very amazing and beautiful, personally. It's something that sounds like a worthy path to be taking for myself. Building upon this are the other divine aspects. So once you are embodying truth, once this rules over your existence entirely, or sorry, not entirely, but rules over your existence, this is called Vohu Khashatra, or the good rule. This is the rule of truth, of Asha. It's utilizing the comprehension and embodying that in our daily lives. And it brings through the individual and then through the collective society, an ideal, purely good society, looking at realizing Asha completely here. And as this builds, we reach the next level of completeness, or Horvatat. Horvatat is then the complete attainment of Asha, or the truth, perfectly and completely for all existence. And this is what's an amazing, I think, again, separation or distinction, I would say, for Zarathustra's philosophy. This has to happen for all existence for us to reach wholeness, right? We need to progress all of existence, making us whole. And what I thought was beautiful is I found this quote from another Iranian philosopher poet, Rumi, who you may have all heard, thousands of years later. And he has this beautiful poem. It says, you are not, the ocean. You are not a drop in the ocean, but you are the entire ocean in a drop. I'm not sure if everyone can read that, but that's basically the quote here. And I thought that was a beautiful illustration of a similar idea. And again, showing how thousands of years later, ideas could be very compatible, because this is intrinsic to us. Again, there is this internal understanding and awareness, which I think is, again, unique about Zarathustra's message. Once we have reached completeness, the final aspect here, if you will, is amaritat, or non-deathness. This is a state of immortal bliss where we transcend mortal existence. Since mortal existence is our kind of mechanism or matrix for growth, once we have reached completeness, we become one with the divine and no longer need that matrix. And we have now transcended mortal existence and reach endless lights. Endless lights is a metaphor Zarathustra uses that I believe is very beautiful. It just makes so much sense to me. Again, thinking about light and illumination leading to us making conscious choices, making choices that improve our existence, that understands the interconnectedness of all of us. When we have endless lights, we have reached that state of existence where we are just purely good. And it's just such a beautiful analogy for me personally. Love to hear about what you all think about these as we get into the discussion. So these are the attributes of the divine. And let's talk a little bit more about how Zarathustra describes the divine. In addition to the attributes, the divine aspects we just went through, Zarathustra's name for the divine gives us a way to understand the nature more and more. Again, I think there are various translations of this. A lot of times you will see Ahura Mazda translated as Lord Wisdom or the Wise God. But in this case, if you look at the Shahnameh from the Persian Ferdowsi poet, he will say the God of life and wisdom, or the Lord of life and wisdom, which I think resonates well with me. And if we think about, I love Dina McIntyre again, her framing here around Ahura means Lord, but Lord of what? And she has a great framing with evidence again on her website backing this up that says, Lord is one who is Lord over the divine aspects that we just covered, which includes non-deathness. So that is lordship over life and mortality, in addition to Mazda, which means wisdom and is another word for reality. Another word for enlightenment. I apologize. And so realizing the divine through the divine aspects, through the thoughts, words, and actions of Asha is enlightenment and subsequently wisdom personified. So the way that Zarathustra explains the divine is of both Ahura and Mazda, which means having the ability and the wisdom of the divine aspects. And that also, again, profoundly for me, is that it includes helping others to attain them so we can reach wholeness and completeness. I want you to hold that thought for a moment, because on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. And it's a really interesting thought around how important it is that we're helping others. So Zarathustra has a huge innovation here around what makes a being divine. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but the paradigm of his day and of many religions today is that basically it's what a being is what makes it divine or a god, right? It's the fact that they have power over us. And Zarathustra comes in and says, no, it's who a being is. It's the nature, right? It is what a being is, the nature of the being that makes it divine and worthy of worship. And the fact that Ahura Mazda is the personification of wisdom, the best good, the best existence. This is why we should seek and revere and worship Ahura Mazda. Not because of the power held over us, not because of fear of hell or the wish that we would like to gain favor, go to heaven, have rain come in the fields, or whatever other things people might wish for. But we worship Ahura Mazda because it is the only thing worthy of reverence as the ideal of goodness. And I think a really beautiful thought in the Gathas is worship is through the theater of our lives, right? We're worshiping through love, through partnership and embodiment of the divine aspects that we just talked about, which reinforces them as a framework for our spiritual growth and evolution. So to recap, the nature of the divine, according to Zarathustra, is beneficial, wholly good. It means to be enlightened through the realization of Asha, this ideal state of existence, and helping others to become enlightened and join that. So that leads us to human purpose and growth. And as we think about this, in the Gathas, the purpose of life is to evolve or grow from a conflicted state of being that is a mixture of harmful and more beneficial to a state of being that is completely, wholly good and beneficial. This is the state of Harvatar, or completeness again, that we've been talking about. A lot of what I'm trying to do with this introduction here is like reinforce the concepts so that we can really grasp them. As a quick side note, I want to say, I think one of the challenges maybe for some people, at least I faced this when I was a teenager and trying to really understand Zarathustra and his message, is all of these Avestan terms, right? They're in this language, it's almost 4,000 years old. It's hard, there's different translations. So I think as we look and build them together as a framework, it's really resonated more for me here. So the purpose of existence, according to Zarathustra, is that we are striving towards this completeness through getting to the state of complete goodness, of whole perfected state. And if we think about this is very interesting. For context, we just mentioned that Zarathustra's society operated, had a variety of religions, and this society operated on a paradigm of fear, very similar to some of the religions today. You worshiped a god, like we said, because there was power held over you. The interesting point that I was looking up the word religion today when my son again asked about the question around religion and philosophy. Religion is defined as belief in a superhuman being that controls things over us, right? So again, this is a really interesting perspective because I think Zarathustra rejects or changes this perspective and presents a different worldview. He's shifting this view of a fear-based paradigm where natural calamities, sickness, poverty, these things are punishments from gods, that we've done something that we now are receiving some kind of punishment, or we haven't done something, we haven't worshipped correctly or given the right gifts or worked through the right priests. And this is something that is, again, very profound and innovative. So this paradigm of fear is precisely what Zarathustra rejects, and he proposes a new way of looking at our reality. He presents the divine as entirely good, wholly beneficial, a friend whose existence is the true, correct order of existence. The way that our reality is ordered through Asha, it includes the law of consequences, which again could mean that some things will happen that we didn't want them to happen. And it might feel challenging or difficult at times. But this is all a way for us to learn through free will and through our choices. Given our good mind, given our ability to comprehend truth, when we experience harmful or bad consequences of a choice, it increases our understanding and compassion. So this isn't punishment. This isn't us needing to go and ask them for forgiveness and ask the priest and say, hey, I've paid you this or I've done this, and now you can gain the favor with the deity as an intermediary for me. What this is actually saying is that we are responsible for our choices ourselves, and we are responsible for the reflection and the growth and the change that comes from those choices. And similarly, beneficial choices are then reinforced, and we also learn from those. Again, this has been amazingly liberating for me personally, right? It gives me a framework where I feel I can approach every situation I'm in life and think about, without fear, okay, what did I do? What were the results? How do I learn from this and grow? And were the results what I had wanted? And is it the way that things should be? Again, to quote my son, this is being a scientist for your own life, right? I think, again, just profound to hear this come out of his mouth. So just to reinforce here, mortal existence is the matrix that enables the experiences necessary for our spiritual growth and to realize Asha, the divine. So as we're kind of wrapping up the end of the philosophy here, and again, viewing this as just an introduction, so I'm really excited to get into the discussion and for us to learn from each other. What does all of this tell us about the relationship between humankind, people, and the divine? In the Gathas, the relationship between the divine and us is not authoritarian. This is, again, a beautiful, unique aspect of Zarathustra's message. It is not described as that of a master to a slave or servant, nor a parent to a child. This relationship is described as a friend to a friend, an ally and a partner. It switches that fear-based paradigm around completely. And this is a paradigm based on mutual love, on interconnectedness. We are our own saviors, utilizing the divine within. And again, thinking back to good conscience and us needing to awaken to the divine within, to the interconnectedness of all things. And use the divine aspects as a framework for realizing this divine. Again, that Zarathustra says we can attain all of these qualities completely. It will take us time. I'm a work in progress. I don't know anyone who's quite gotten there yet, but that's the beauty of this journey, right? We're working through growth and learning. And what's again an amazing thought here is we can't do this on our own. It's impossible to advance ourselves spiritually, to learn from divine values being expressed in material words without making our material world also a better place. Which leads to one of my favorite Gothic verses, Yasna 38.9, which says, "Therefore may we be those who shall heal this world." And there's again various translations of this. Some might say improve, progress, perfect. I think the gist of the meaning is still there, but I think heal makes sense to me and says healing from what? Healing, progressing, again, improving is from the disparity we see between the real and the ideal. So between reality and Asha. It's us looking and realizing Asha. And through the divine aspects, we realize Asha and bring it to life completely and perfectly for all existence. So again, this is a wonderful thought that I think Dina has shared in one of her talks that really has inspired me, and I retain it all the time, where every time you engage in a project, however small, and that benefits other human beings, other life forms, our environment, you are partnering with wisdom and the divine and being a healer of existence. This is again reinforcing that message in the previous slide. We are in Persian we say, you're the co-workers of God. We are the allies. We are here to work together and make existence better. And this helps us realize Zarathustra's idea that humankind and God are part of the same whole. So once we have realized this, once we have reached this state of understanding and consciousness and enlightenment, we reach the endless lights and we have become one with the divine, which I think is a very beautiful idea. So in summary, I know there was a lot of information in the last 30 or so minutes. Again, I'm hoping this spurs a discussion that we can have together and we all learn from each other. I think Aryan, who's on the call, always says this, and I think it's a beautiful thought as well. And the order here matters, right? In thoughts, words, and deeds, right? He always says, we think things, and so that we can think about Ashan, the ideal existence. Then we speak about it with our friends, and that's what we're doing here. And then we go off and we do things in the world to make it better. So that's what I'm hoping to do all together. In summary, just to kind of recap the core principles here, Zarathustra is teaching us a practical spiritual philosophy focused on improving existence, but through self-realization, which is realization of the divine, actually, right? So we're understanding the divine within and growing that. And to recap, core concepts here are goodness and truth. The divine is wholly good, beneficial, our friend and ally. We're not being punished. We're not being held power over us by the divine. We're here to work with the divine and reach the wholly good order of existence, the way existence should be. That happens through free will and growth. Human beings are free to choose, to learn from our choices, to adjust, and grow and realize Asha through our thoughts, words, and deeds, being a scientist for our own lives, right? And that's how we realize wisdom. We're using all the divine aspects which are attainable by us as we seek to realize truth and wisdom, and mortal existence, our material world, is the matrix for this spiritual growth. And that happens when we heal all of existence. We do this by actively engaging life and helping others to grow. Again, what's amazing here is there's no like personal salvation here. You're not just saving yourself. We can't do this in isolation by rejecting the world. We have to engage the world and make everything and everyone better. And that reaches us to the completeness, where we understand, where we realize the divine and understand that we are parts of the same whole, progressing our existence to be entirely good and transcend our current mortal existence and reach the endless lights. So with that, I thank you all very much. I wanted to make a quick acknowledgement here. I will share this deck with anyone who would like it, or we can coordinate through CZC of how to share it. there are some links from the amazing scholars. Again, this has been largely a compilation of work from Gina McIntyre, and I'm so honored that she is here today, from her website and her seminar from CCC as well. Dr. Katie Irani and Dr. Jafari also have some amazing resources for us to look at. And there's also the CCC PR website that is linked here for anyone who would like to learn more. And with that, I wanted to spend time and learn from each other. So I'd love to get started in a discussion. And again, please think of this as a thought catalyst. Thank you so much.